Welcome back to Lightning GIS. Today what we're going to do is give you a tour of the Agisoft Metashape graphical user interface. Metashape is a very powerful piece of software that allows you to process photography, often captured from a drone, but also from handheld cameras. Even your phone you can use to capture the original photos. But as long as the photos are sharp and they overlap sufficiently, you can import those photos into Agisoft Metashape and create 3D models and products of the subject that you photograph. So let's take a look at Agisoft Metashape's graphical user interface and give you a quick tour. Alright, we'll start with the toolbar here at the top of the window. Over here on the left we've got the normal buttons you would expect in almost any graphical user interface: the New Project, Open Project, Save Project. Here the arrow is the main cursor type that you're going to use in Metashape, but keep in mind we've got a button that resets the view, a cameras button, a markers button, and we'll come back to those in a little bit. Alright, let's take a look at the workspace panel. The workspace panel over here is sort of the table of contents for your project. Now by default there's one chunk. A chunk is sort of a subspace within your workspace where you can import data and process it separately from the data that's in the other chunks. So each chunk could be a different part. Say you had a big project and you wanted to break it into 4 different parts to process, and then you can merge them all back later. You might have separate chunks for each project. In this case I'm using chunks as sort of different steps of the process here. By default there's only one chunk and it will start out empty, and it will be called chunk 1 or chunk 0. The first thing that you normally do is import photos to that. So from the workflow menu I'm going to choose either add photos or add folders. If you want to add photos, you go in and you shift select the individual photos that you want. If you just want to bring in the whole folder, it might be easier to do the add folder, so I'll do that. Navigate to the location of your photos. That's where the folder is that contains all of my photos. If I double click in there, you don't see anything because it's not looking for photos right now, it's just looking for a folder. But there are 77 photos in that folder, so I'll select that folder. It does a little quick processing. I want to tell it that these are single cameras. In Metashape lingo, a camera is a photograph, so each photograph is called a camera. So I'm going to add 77 different ones. You can see here all of those photos have been brought in. There's an NA after the name of the photo, the file name of the photo. That NA means not aligned. And if you look here, it says 0 out of 77 photos are aligned. So now we've defined what a camera is. I'll move to my next chunk. I'm just going to double click that to activate it, and here you can see that all 77 photos have been aligned. So I ran the alignment process that is under the workflow menu. So I've already done that here just because it takes a few minutes and I didn't want you to have to watch it on the video. When the alignment is done, you get a set of tie points. These are the points that Metashape has determined occur on multiple photos and allow it to start to do a rough draft of your 3D model of your area. That 3D point cloud, that sparse point cloud of tie points, which is called the sparse cloud, is shown here in this window. This is sort of a rough draft, but you can see it's pretty good. I've got this dam at the end of a reservoir. You can see the concrete wall of the spillway structure itself, the dam berm, and so forth. So what we're looking at here is the model window, and there's a tab here that allows you to look at the model window. By default you're in that. The way that you manipulate your 3D model in this window is using this navigation sphere. The navigation sphere has 3 equators. There's a red equator. If you hover close to that, you can see it goes from sort of light red to it appears. There's a green equator, and then there's a blue equator, and they're all perpendicular to each other, so they're sort of an X, Y, and Z equator. When you grab the equator, it only lets you move the model in that plane. So until you're very proficient with the 3D sphere to move your model, you may want to just use those equators. However, once you become proficient at the 3D ball, you can grab in between the equators and move in all three planes at once, and manipulate your model that way. Now, if you get all out of whack and lose track of where you're at, you can click the 0 button on your keyboard to reset your view. There's also a reset model view up here on the toolbar, and then you can start over. It sort of takes you back to your default position and lets you start over and sort of find your way back to where you're at. And believe me, it is easy to get lost sometimes in these 3D point clouds, so that reset view button can really be useful. Now what I'm going to do is, on this menu, I'm going to click the cameras button. Remember, cameras are the individual photographs. What that does is it shows the position of where the camera was when each photograph was taken. So I'll rotate so we're kind of looking down. This would be the drone's eye view. These pictures were captured with a drone that flew back and forth across the study area. Each rectangle here is the footprint of the camera at that point in 3D space. If I rotate up here, you can see that each footprint has an axis coming out of it. That's the axis of the camera. So you can tell from this that all of our camera axes are more or less orthogonal or perpendicular to the Earth's surface. Sometimes you either intentionally or accidentally, because the drone's being blown around, get camera or photographs that are not perpendicular, that are oblique, and you'll be able to tell that with by paying attention to these axes. Now, if you project these footprints down to the ground, as they get closer to the ground, they get bigger and bigger, so each of these camera footprints will overlap at the ground surface. I believe we had, for this project, we were going for about 80% overlap, so each of these footprints would overlap with the adjacent footprints by about 80% once they're projected all the way to the ground. All right, I'm going to turn my cameras off, turn my markers on, go to our next chunk, turn the markers on. So markers are the way that we tell Photoscan where our ground control points are. So here what I've done is I've imported the markers, latitude, longitude, and altitude, into Photoscan. We can switch to the reference pane here, and you can see that for marker 1, I've given it a longitude, a latitude, and an altitude. Each of these markers then gets marked. If we go to the View menu and turn the Photos console on, we have a list of photos, and I'll just right-click, Filter Photos by Markers. This makes some guesses based on what Photoscan knows. If I double-click on that, I can come in here, and there is my ground control point 1. It's this orange triangle. And somewhere in this photo, there's my marker 1 is there. So if I bring that marker over to my ground control point, I'm telling Photoscan that this marker correlates with this exact spot on this photograph, and that exact spot has the longitude, latitude, and altitude that are listed there. If I hit the page down button, it will move me to the next photograph in the Photos console. I can move those markers, and I've got a separate video that you can watch on how to set markers. So I'm not going to go any further with this, but I wanted to point that out. Now I can get back to my model by clicking on the model, and what you can see here is that that has gotten closer to, instead of that marker floating up in the air, now it's getting closer to being clamped on the ground. If I switch back to my workspace panel and come to my finished chunk, you can see that all the markers here are clamped to the ground because I finished setting all of these markers in Photoscan. Alright, now part of many processing steps in Photoscan is running the Optimize tool. If you come back to the reference panel, And the reference panel and the workspace take up the same place in the window, and you flip through them using these tabs at the bottom. And I'm going to go ahead and grab this boundary between the model space and the reference panel and widen it so that we can see all the data that's in here. First, at the top of the reference panel, we have a cameras list. This is a list of all the photos in all 77 photos that we've imported, and then the estimated longitude, latitude, and altitude of the camera at the time the photo was taken. Then there's some accuracy information and some other information about the orientation of the photo there. Then we have below that the markers list. This is a list of all our markers, which are correlating to our ground control points, and the latitude, longitude, and altitude, and the accuracy of each of those positions. So these accuracies are based on the GPS data that we processed when we surveyed the ground control markers in the field. So you can see here we're at centimeter accuracy for each of these positions. The first number is the horizontal accuracy, the second is the vertical accuracy. So the horizontal accuracy would go with latitude and longitude, and the vertical accuracy would go with the altitude reading. And then based on the number of photos that we've set that marker in, where the GCP, the ground control point, was visible, we get some estimates of an overall error and the number of projections or the number of photos that that ground control point and marker are in. All right, now through several, you'll commonly use the optimize cameras dialog. When you click this star-shaped icon, it brings up the dialog. I'm going to hit cancel here, but that's how you run optimized cameras. Any workflow you're using to guide you through the process of processing data in Photoscan will include the optimize tool. You can find that optimize cameras under the tools menu or the star icon in the reference panel. The other thing I want to point out in the reference panel here is the settings. For the reference panel, this is where the coordinate system for your workspace is set. Normally that will be determined based on the coordinate system of the GPS data embedded in the photos. When you import the photos, Metashape looks for the geotags in those photos and then uses the coordinate system for those geotags as the coordinate system for the workspace. Then there's some accuracy here for different features within the processing environment, and those are things that sometimes you have to set during different points in your workflow. So they're there under the settings button here in the reference panel. All right, I've already pointed out the photos console down here where we get a list of all the photos. If you want to look at an individual photo, you can double click on it. As we said when I gave you the demonstration on setting some markers, you can zoom in and out by rolling the scroll button on your mouse, and then you can grab the photo and pan left and right. Even after you've zoomed in, you can pan left or right on that photo. To get to the next photo, the easiest thing is just to hit the page down button, and you can move in successively through each photograph in your data set. I'm going to go to the View menu here and click on the console, and that will open up the console menu, and then I can dock that here by grabbing it and coming down above my photos. And this console menu is useful because it tells you what Metashape is doing in the background at any one time. And it's got a date and a timestamp there, and you can see all the processing that's going on in the background. Right now nothing's happening, but the next time we hit even the save button, you can see the console has updated some information there. You can close these using the X's here and then reopen them through the View menu. And then lastly, what I want to do is show you a couple of preference settings that you'll want to change the first time you install or reinstall Photoscan. So we're going to go to the Tools menu, Preferences. Now most of these tabs, there's nothing you need to change right out of the box. They're just things you can come in and tweak if you have preferences about how the graphical user interface works. But by default, when you first install Photoscan, these two boxes are unchecked. You definitely want to check your GPU devices. Most computers will have one graphical processing unit, and you'll want to check that because that allows Photoscan to use the GPU in processing, which will greatly speed up the results. I also recommend that you check use CPU when performing GPU accelerated processing. For most computers that will make things go faster. If you have a gaming computer or a computer that's optimized for Photoscan that's got multiple GPUs, they'll all be listed here, and in that case you should check all of them to allow Photoscan to utilize all of those GPUs. It will greatly speed up your processing. All right, I'm going to click apply, and the other menu I want to bring you to is the network. If you have a fast internet connection, which will allow you to upload data to the cloud quickly, but a relatively slow computer, you may benefit from using Agisoft's cloud processing feature. So what this does, if you check this button and you put some information in here that you have set up on the Agisoft website, it will upload your project to the cloud, and then when you do things like some of the processing steps, which can be very processor and time intensive, take a long time on a slow computer, it may go faster in the cloud. If you want to play with that, I welcome you to click this cloud.agisoft.com link and go there. You'll have to create a user account for their cloud processing network. And then they have some instructions about how to set things up, and you'll want to follow all of that. And you could try out this cloud processing. For smaller projects or projects on faster computers, you probably won't want to do that. You'll want to leave that unchecked. All right, that's the last preference I wanted to go over with you. I hope this tour of the Metashape graphical user interface leaves you ready to roll and get started on your very first Metashape project. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Lightning GIS, and good luck with your photogrammetry.